Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it appears that on the internet again in the last few years, due to a number of people on YouTube, a number of pseudo-experts out there saying things that the venerable bench press, America's favorite lift, and it's often joked around the world that because Americans have become so lazy and slothful in the last couple of generations, that our favorite lift is one where we can lay on our backs while we exercise. But the jokes about laziness aside, a lot of people are saying and trying to create arguments to explain that the bench press is not a fantastic chest builder, that it's not even a great mass builder, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's completely absurd. One of the biggest arguments I've seen made is that, it doesn't recruit the chest that much, it recruits other muscles, anterior deltoids, triceps a lot more. It doesn't work your chest that effectively. Look, if that is happening to you, you do not know how to perform the bench press. It's because you don't have your scapula retracted, you're bouncing it off your chest, or you're skipping the bottom of the range of motion. You're maybe coming halfway down and pressing back up and using a much heavier weight that you could do through the full range of motion. So of course your triceps and things are going to get a little more work because you're creating the equivalent of pin presses, like of pressing a parceler off of a board, which is more tricep because it just works the lockout a lot more. But if you're performing the exercise correctly, scapula retracted, touching your chest, or even the people who stop short an inch short of the chest, at least they're coming close. I don't recommend that for injury reasons, but to say that stopping an inch short of the chest and pausing isn't going to work the chest isn't true. That'll actually work it very effectively, just as well as pausing on the chest. But if you're performing the exercise correctly, the pectorals are one of the primary movers. There's no way around that. It is impossible for them to not be one of the primary movers and be doing most of the work in that situation, even though the other muscles are being utilized and will be primary movers themselves. The pecs will be doing most of the workload. It's impossible physiologically for them not to, unless you have some sort of major deformity or injury preventing it from happening. And if that's the case, no exercise is going to work your chest. Now, the other thing that a lot of people bring up is that, and particularly Sebastian Sunit and Ian McStruthers have alluded to this bullshit. Well, it's not bullshit. They talk about the angle of the insertions of the way that the fibers orientate towards the joint, making a difference. Well, first of all, anyone who understands basic physics knows that unless you go beyond about a 15-degree angle of difference or some sort of pulley type system like that, you're not losing a very significant amount of energy. You'll be losing some, but not very significant. And most people who bench press use at least a slight arch, so you're turning it into a slight decline anyways. You're not completely flat back. But that's really besides the point. Let's say you're losing 5% of your energy and it's making it more difficult for the pecs to do the work. That is not going to cause them to grow less. The exercise is more difficult than if you had a different angle. So that's basically saying that the flat bench requires the chest, because of the angle and the mechanical disadvantage, to work harder than on a decline to move the same amount of weight. So think about that for a minute. If anything, the logic would dictate that because of the slight mechanical disadvantage that requires the pecs to work slightly harder to move the same amount of weight, that the flat bench should technically be a slightly superior chest stimulator to the decline. You guys see the problem there with this chain of logic. And the other thing to consider is that, does it really matter? Even if you can prove that one exercise is 2% or 3% more efficient on a single rep for recruiting muscle fibers in a muscle, in the real world, once you start putting enough tension on that muscle, enough workload through doing multiple sets, doing multiple reps, it isn't going to matter anymore. And the final argument I always see guys make, which they made over on my fan page when I brought this topic up the other day, well, I wouldn't use only the bench press to develop my chest. Well, you know what? Here's the reality, guys. Unless you are genetically gifted in a muscle, and that muscle just responds to whatever you do, there's no muscle in the body that I would tell you you should only do a single exercise for it if you want to develop it maximally. Guess what? For all of us who have muscle groups that we are not genetically gifted in, that we're not genetic freaks, we probably need 2, maybe even 3 different exercises for that muscle group to fully develop it. We probably do. So if your shoulders and your triceps grow faster than your chest and you're struggling to develop a chest, you know what? You probably need some incline work in there. You might even need to add some flies in. No one is ever suggesting that because one exercise is good for a muscle group, that people who aren't just really gifted with that muscle group should do just that one exercise and never anything else. And that's the most absurd argument I've ever heard towards the fact that the bench press isn't a good chest builder. But in my experience, the guys who do bench press whose chest is lagging, it is generally an issue of them not performing the exercise correctly. That is the problem. them ego lifting instead of doing the exercise correctly, which means scapular retracted, touching the chest, maybe even pausing on the chest and then driving up. They're bouncing off the chest, they're doing partial reps, and then they blame the bench press for their lack of development. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh, Mount Bicepius.